The Topolban Vishnu Prayag project was being built by the National Thermal Power Corporation. It was in the advanced stages of planning when we did the work. It's a little bit bigger project, 520 megawatts. Again, it will divert the Galiganga River through almost a 12-kilometer tunnel again into the Alakananda River. That's Matt McCandless, one of our students, and Santosh, one of our translators that we worked with. So this is the valley. This valley is a spectacular valley. This is the road to Tibet. In fact, Tibet is not that very far away. And there's the Indo-Tibet police. India still calls them the Tibet police, Indo-Tibet police, that monitor that border. Matt McCandless, who was in the previous picture, he did some of his research on microhydro right near the border, because in these areas much of the power is generated through microhydro. There's no power to these villages. So the barrage site for this facility is just down in this valley here. So we were looking at public involvement, and I just wanted to put up here some of the hallmarks of exemplary public involvement. And one of the questions we often get is whether we're applying North American concepts to work in India. In fact, these concepts come from the Indian literature, not from our own, although we support these particular measures that are indicated here and would add to those ourselves. So early and adequate notice of all major steps in project planning and decision making, fair and reasonable access to regulatory and project information, financial assistance to groups in the civic sector, meaningful opportunities to comment on the need for and the purpose of the project, alternatives, key project features, and then open and fair public hearings. So that's what we started with, and we started to look at how people were involved in these projects. What did we find out? So notice of project steps. Well, they were non-existent or inadequate in both cases. Many of the local people learned about the projects through word of mouth. As this one person said, in 1995, we found out when JP was coming because machines appeared. And another person had said, they started to cut some of the forest, and we wondered what these people were doing. This project, these dates are not when we were doing our research. This project was very long in creation. In fact, the owners of the project changed over time, so it took a long time to come to fruition. Provision of information we also found was very poor in both cases. Although the NTPC case did a better job, they had display booths at a local fair. There were 3 information offices set up, and there was a detailed project report, but the project report was never released. In much of our work in India, this is one of the things that we found out. Despite the creation of these documents, local people can't get access to them. This is just a picture of, this was the opening of one of those information offices in up in just north of, in Topolban. So it was a place where people could come to try to get information about the project and understand a little bit more about what was going on. And they could also, there was a complaints book, they could write questions or complaints. While we were there in one of our trips, there was a protest against the NTPC project. As you can appreciate, there's a certain amount of animosity about the types of development that are going on in these mountain environments, and we were able to witness some of that. In terms of financial assistance, there was no financial assistance in either project to help people participate in those projects. Although in the JP case, assistance had been provided to villages to help them with remediation. And these are often called in India catchment area treatment plans. So they're administered by the Forest Department, and they help people to rehabilitate their areas either from damage or for the potential of damage from the projects. In both cases, again, we found no meaningful opportunities for the public to comment on the project documentation. There were some important meetings held on the project, features and impacts, but other than informal meetings, there was really nothing that took place to involve people. This is one of the quotes that a participant said, NTPC did not involve the people who will really be affected where they will do the work. The people in attendance were mostly selected. We put the questions to NTPC, but they were not told anything. We are not satisfied. There were no public hearings in the JP case, and in the top event there was a hearing, but it wasn't well publicized. It was really more of a public meeting than a hearing. So just in conclusion, of course we found in the end that community involvement did not exemplify the characteristics of meaningful civic engagement, although NTPC did improve on JP's public involvement profile. And we did find the public sector should play a more active role in regulating large-scale hydro development. This is a conclusion we've also come to in Canada as well, that the public sector has been moving out of being involved in trying to help with participatory processes, and they're leaving participatory processes totally to the proponents to achieve, and in doing that, often the proponents have difficulty facilitating meaningful engagement because they want the project to proceed. So some of the recommendations that we came up with in this case are that JP and the Forest Department should provide regular public accounts of the catchment area treatment plan funds and how they were used, open up more of a discussion process. The NTPC should immediately publish the contents of critical documents like the DPR and remediation plan. There should be reasonable financial assistance from the Ministry of Environment and Forests to help local people hire technical assistance or legal experts. And then lastly, the Minister of Environment and Forest and the Forest Department must play a bigger role in negotiations between those parties. So again, picking up on this idea that the government needs to re-engage in the process of decision making. So I'll just end there. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have about our work. I should just mention that we've continued this work on mega hydro development in the Himalaya. There is a paper that's resulted from this work, and I have a couple copies with me. But we've just finished another paper on these projects that brings in more of the learning dimension that I talked about earlier. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. Don't be shy. I'm sorry if I spoke quickly. Actually, I have another presentation that I might give in Chilaporn's class tomorrow morning, where we looked at a ski hill development in Manali area. And the interesting part of the participation activities in that project is that the public became much more engaged. They were a lot more active. There was a lot more activism on the parts of the public. They became much better organized. One of the things, you often think of these more remote parts of countries like India having a lot of NGOs. In fact, there are very few NGOs or ENGOs operating in these mountain areas. I was surprised to find that out. And so people are left to more or less organize on their own. There was very active participation on behalf of the public in that case, including having their own public meetings and public hearings. There was a congregation of the gods in the region. They brought legal cases against the proponents. They brought legal cases against the government, and much of that is still pending. The government belatedly tried to have a public hearing, and the public hearing was basically a mob ensued at the public hearing. People were so outraged with what had happened and how it was proceeding. So I think that they may not be listening to us, but they are starting to listen to the people, because local people are organizing themselves a lot more and a lot more effectively. And you know, India is home to protest. So one of the forms of protest that occurred in the JP case was a hunger strike. Another form of protest was blockage of the roads. So in these areas, there's only one road in and out. So when the roads are blocked, nothing's going in or out. And there's no airports, there's no train stations. The only way you can get in and out is by helicopter or by vehicle. So when the roads are blocked by protest, that creates action. But India's used to protest. So some of these new forms, especially the legal activism, and bringing the gods in as part of protest activities is new, and people are getting more organized and sophisticated.
When you talk about the government, what do you mean by the government? Is it central government or state government?
For these projects, it's both. So there's involvement of both state government approvals. So there's a state government approvals required, and there's federal. The federal approval is an environmental assessment approval that's required. So there's two levels of involvement. It's similar to our country. There's often two levels of involvement in big project decision making. Oh yeah, they have conflict between them. In fact, in this case, politics, well, not so much in the hydro cases, but in the ski village case that I was just talking about and gave the example of, politics plays a huge role in what might occur in that case. The two main political parties, one opposed to the project and the other one's in favor of the project. So if in the elections that are going on right now, it looks like the party that's in favor of the project is going to be elected, and so the project will likely proceed despite the protests of local people. It may proceed in a bit different way, but it may still proceed.
Does the global warming affect to the ice cap there and the communities?
Yeah, I have a PhD student, Upendra Pradhan. Upendra's looking at how communities are adapting to changes in the ice conditions, snow and ice conditions in these areas. There's more warm weather. So the ice cap is receding. The glaciers are getting smaller. But they also are getting more precipitation. So it's an interesting dynamic situation that's happening right now in this area. And we're looking at the impacts on food production, for example. Yes?
Thank you for your talk. And actually, I would like to say that I really like your idea. That's part of your research that say that try to listen to local idea, to listen to like the idea of people in your study size, not the American idea, something like this. But I don't see any parts of your presentation that to show how local people to participate in your work. So but I see the street protesting in your presentation, and I do see you say that no public hearing. So I just would like you to explain more how you deal with people or local people in your research as your research title.
Yep.
And as part of idea, try to include local idea in your work.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
I'm just going to a slide here. It's this. I didn't highlight this slide, but we indicate here that our research was participatory and interactive. We combined rapid rule appraisal and participatory rule appraisal techniques using both qualitative and quantitative methods. We used semi-structured interviews, group interviews, field observations, document reviews, and workshops. We, at the Natural Resources Institute, we do not practice to any great extent participatory action research. When I say that, what I mean is our understanding of participatory action research is that the researcher is a facilitator, not a researcher. That the researcher does not design the study questions or the ideas or the methodology. They're just a facilitator to something that's happened. We try to engage in participatory research, so we try to work with people on problems that they have and try to understand why they have those problems. So one of our projects that we did in Kulu Manali related to trying to help community find ways to ban poly bags. We did not go to the community to do that work. When we went to the community, we found out that one of the environmental issues that they had, and it was very obvious on the landscape, related to poly bags. And we helped them to try to come up with ways that they might successfully implement a ban on poly bags, which is, in fact has since taken place. So Manali, the small town of Manali, was one of the first places to do that. It's now statewide, countrywide. It's spread throughout India from a few small centers. So we didn't go in to do that work. It wasn't part of our plan. It presented itself, and we participated with the community in developing that. We went to India to do specific research projects. For example, look at joint forest management. And we found out about other things, as you always do. You learn about other things that are going on. One of the things that we learned about was the issues that people had with development and their problem with gaining voice in that development process, which related nicely with interests some of us have in governance. So we designed research projects around those problems. The extent that the community was involved in designing those research projects, we wrote the grant proposals, but we had community partners that helped us with that process. But it's very difficult to do that sort of work, especially when it's halfway around the world. So that's the way that our work was participatory. But I think it's also important to point out that much of this work was done by master's students. And the extent that master's students who are going to a foreign country to do their research, and to a foreign country like India, you could only expect so much in terms of being able to have a skill set that's advanced enough to design a completely participatory project in the field. I mean, we can try to do some of that, but it's very difficult for our students to do that. Any other?
So I have another. It's not a question. It is possible if we will have the exchange program to send our students to study or work over there for a short period of time to learn more about conducting research in like in cold weather or like that, and your study come here to learn to conduct research in warm country, in warm weather.
Yeah, That's a very good question. As I said in the previous talk about signing MOUs, one of the things that's happened with universities over the course of time with the signing of memorandums of understanding is that there's no money attached to them. And that's very common now. It used to be the case that there would be some money attached to them, small amounts of money, mind you, but at least some money. These projects require research grants. So I have a student working here right now who's on one of my research grants. The idea is to hopefully get students from here and from U of M working together. That's what we did with one of our India projects. We were able to secure funding that actually supported the idea of cross-cultural collaboration in research amongst students. And so that's something that I would like to try to achieve again with this grant, with this MOU, is something like we did with that grant. Now, to be honest, I hadn't thought of sending students from Thailand to India. I've been thinking more about exchanges between Thailand and Canada and vice versa. But India is a lot closer, a lot cheaper to get to, and a lot cheaper to live. So maybe it's a great idea. Any other questions about?
John, I have a question, but it's actually about your former talk on the University of Manitoba.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you want to jump around or.
Yeah, that's fine. Sure.
And you talked about public involvement, public awareness from an educational point of view at your in your work in Manitoba, and specifically in North America. Now that in at least North American news, the environment in a broad sense has been much more obvious, the problems we're having with the environment and the effects. Have you seen any commensurate interest in terms of faculty enrollment at environmental faculties, whether it be direct core courses or electives? I mean, are the students of today taking a more active interest in an educational way? Yeah. And also, maybe to go back to what you were just talking about, maybe the second part of my question, is there also a similar interest in the business community in North America? Because after all, the environment very much is an economic factor as well. So do you see any more interest from the business community crossing over into education?
Thank you for that question. Mainly because it gives me the opportunity to blow our horn a little bit. Our faculty had the largest increase of incoming students last year across the university. We had an over 11% increase in our enrollment last year. So I think, yes, I think that students are very interested in the sorts of programming that our faculty is offering. And I think similar things are happening at institutions like Dalhousie University, University of Waterloo, University of British Columbia, Simon Fraser, where they offer similar sorts of programs. I think they've also seen increases in their enrollment, partly because there's, I guess, some more innovative things happening that are exciting students, like our work in the Arctic, or at UBC. UBC has a new state-of-the-art building that's part of the environment school there, where they're trying to create new systems and understand new systems for everything from building construction to water saving to making people's quality of life better when they're there working in that building. They know they're going to fail in some of the things that they're trying, but it's very exciting work that they're doing. On the business side is also very interesting, in part because there's rich people around, and some of those people have made their money in the resource sector and universities in North America anyways are looking more and more for private sector sponsorship to help run programs. So our faculty is a named faculty, which was very controversial. We were one of the first faculties at our university to be named. When I say named, it's named after a person, Clayton H. Riddell. That was part of the deal for Clayton H. Riddell giving us $10 million to help support the work in our faculty. Now, he doesn't play a direct role in what's happening. That money came to us unfettered, but that's not always the case, and that's something that's become, there's closer, people are looking more closely at some of these agreements that are happening between private industry and universities. In terms of funding research, though, I would say that there's still a wariness outside of some of the professional schools. Although some of my colleague Nikki Coper's research is being funded by the oil and gas industry. So they're interested in looking at the impacts on songbirds of their facilities. So yeah, I think there's quite a bit happening. Unfortunately, from a government perspective, the government's moving the other way. So, and I just read today in your nation newspaper that maybe your government's starting to move that way as well. So making it easier for developers to not have to go through regulatory approval processes like environmental assessment. Does that answer your?
It does. If I could do a follow-up. So are you saying then, I realize you probably haven't done research on this, but anecdotally, are you saying that you think the recent rise in enrollment or educational interest is more due to cutting-edge programs and opportunities than it is just general public student awareness that our environment is at a critical point?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the two things. Sorry, I didn't say that, but I think it's a combination of both those things. So I think there are, you know, when I look across at some of our sister institutions, I think there are some exciting research opportunities for graduate students and for undergraduate students. And in combination with that, there's also greater interest in sustainability. So we have more and more people moving back to the land in Canada, trying to live more simply, trying to make their lifestyles more sustainable. And we see more of that interest coming into our programs, and they challenge us to create better programs to cater to those needs. I was going to say none of the students are very quiet.
I would like to ask you about the public involvement activities. What is the process of public hearing in India, and what is well to include all stakeholders into the process? Is it because the characteristic of local people that they are afraid to raise their voice? Because now I'm doing the EIA in Myanmar for Thawa Industrial Estate project, and in Myanmar the government can command their local people to do anything, and now they already command them to move from the area to other areas without any protest, and I have to conduct public involvement activities there, and I would like to know that what method that I should apply to extract the real need from local people.
My experience in India is that people aren't afraid to speak up. That's not the issue. So, for example, I didn't mention, but the area where these pictures are taken, the background of this particular slide is the home of the Chipko movement. So the Chipko movement came from that area. So hug a tree, it's famous international movement that saw the protection of the forest in this area, and that was women in the village of Topolvan that took that leadership role. So I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem has been the way that the process has unfolded, and the main issues have been related to when the hearing's taking place, where it's going to take place. We studied one case where the location of the hearing changed on the day of the hearing. Not that that's that unusual in India, but nonetheless it doesn't make for a great hearing. People having information prior to the hearing so that they can make an informed input to the hearing process. So we found that, in the second case that we looked at, there was more effort to try to make that happen, to make people more aware of what was going on before the hearing took place so they could ask questions. Another problem is that the hearings are very short. So in Canada, for a large project like one of these hydro projects, the hearing might last 25 days, not one day. So it's very hard for people to have an opportunity to express themselves if there's a fairly large number of people affected. And when I say large, you still might not have that many speakers when you meet over 25 days. And if you're trying to condense that to a very short period of time, it makes a bit of a mockery of the process. So I think people are getting more and more leery of the hearing process actually because of that.
And in Canada, do you pay money for the participant who come to public hearing? Because in Thailand, the consultant would like to include as much as participants to the public hearing, but we are not allowed to pay for transportation costs to the stakeholders. So some stakeholders are reluctant to come because it's consumed much money and they waste their time.
And in fact, in Canada, we have participant funding programs at the federal level for only hearings. And hearings are probably, well, they might be 1% or a little bit more than 1% of all the environmental assessment cases that take place. So it's a very small proportion where there is participant funding available federally. And that funding isn't to bring people to hearings, it's to fund participants to make a case before the hearing panel so that they can do their technical research. The only province that provides funding for participants of the sort that you described is the one I come from, Manitoba. So we have some provision to help people to get to hearings, mainly because a lot of the people that are affected by projects are in the north. But most often what we do, rather than bringing people to the hearing, we bring the hearing to the people. So the hearing panelists will all go to the northern community to meet people and hear them in their own communities.
I just have a...
Oh, sorry.
Yes. I just have a question related to research fund. I'm not sure in our Canada government side there is a kind of how can I say, dual research program that, for example, like joint program both sides in between Canada and Thailand. I mean, like a government agency that can support for both sides.
Yeah, I was going to, and I meant to do that this morning to check to see which programs were available. Every institution, every university has programs to try to help to attract foreign students. I was saying at lunch that it's big business, but one of one of the programs that we have at our university is that if your GPA is good enough, then you pay the same fees as a Canadian student. You don't pay these exorbitant foreign student fees that are common in North America. So that's one thing. But also, there are some multilateral and bilateral agreements between governments. And I meant to check to see if we had anything with Thailand, Manitoba specifically, before today, and I forgot to do that. I apologize. They rarely say much about education, unfortunately. More commonly, they provide more opportunities for business transactions that may involve education in some way. But I did mean to check that, and I will look into that.
Well, I'll be bold and speak on behalf of everyone and say thank you very much, Professor Sinclair, for the time. We enjoyed it immensely. Thank you. At this time, we'd like to take a 15-minute break. I believe there's some refreshments in the foyer. Let's come back at 2:45, please, to bear witness to the signing of the MOU and the beginning of the formal cooperation between Mahidol University and University of Manitoba.
Thank you.